welcome to this webinar on biomimicry. We had a lot of registrations, so I'm very excited that we're having this presentation. My name is Marloes Reining, and I'm from Solid Green Consulting, but also from Regenerative Collaborative South Africa, and I'll be your facilitator today together with Milan Meister. So unfortunately, we don't have a sponsor for today, and we are managing the cost of this webinar through some of the leftovers from previous webinars. But this is really a call to all of you. If you know a company that is willing to sponsor us or to sponsor a webinar, please let us know. It's not a huge amount at all. It basically covers the cost of the CPD validation. So it's not a huge amount. So if you or your company or you know a company with lots of money, please let us know and put us in touch with them so that we can get these webinars sponsored for the next time. And seeing that it's not sponsored this time, I'm going to take some time. I'm going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Regenerative Collaborative. So we are the Regenerative Collaborative of South Africa, and I just want to sort of briefly introduce what we're doing and who we are, basically. So the founders and directors are these 4 people on the slide. So it's Tulani and me who initiated it, and fairly soon thereafter Adri and Adele joined us into the collaborative. It's a voluntary organization. It's a non-profit organization, and we basically really try to promote regenerative design in the built environment, and really trying to educate people through these webinars and getting people enthusiastic about this regenerative collaborative. And we cannot do this work alone, even though we all have our full-time day jobs as well. And so we're relying on volunteers to assist us with the work that we're doing. And we have a number of committees that we run. So one is the events committee, which is mainly me, Janice, and Lisette, running the events and trying to come up with ideas, trying to get sponsorships, doing all the CPD validations, and these 2 stars are helping me with that. So big thank you to them. And then we have a social media committee, which currently is just Milan Meister, and he's really looking for some friends in his committee. So if you are like a young professional and knows the inside outs of posting on Facebook and LinkedIn, please volunteer and help Milan out. He's really looking for some friends to help him out with the social media for us. And then we have an advocacy committee, and we're still sort of in the process of defining what that means, but Andre Harms and Mark Charette are joining Adri and Adele in this committee, and really trying to, come up with some constructive advocacy and education going forward. Okay, so really this is my call. Please join us if you feel like you want to join the organization. You really don't have to know the ins and outs of Regenerative Collaborative. If you just want to volunteer your time and help with admin, totally fine. We can use all the help that you can give us. Okay, so then also all our previous events are hosted on the GreenNet website, and these 2 ladies are assisting and volunteering a lot of time as well to this good cause. Karen is sending out the GreenNet newsletters, which you probably have received in the past, and Michelle is uploading making sure that all the webinars get uploaded on the GreenNet website. So if you're also in need of other CPD points, you can go to our website and take previous webinars for CPD points as well. Okay, and then last slide is really if you have an idea on a topic that you would like to see on one of these webinars, please let us know. Lisette will share the link to this form if you have a good idea about a topic, or you have maybe even some speakers and a sponsor preferably, then let us know and you can win 500 Rand. So for today's session, Milan won the prize. So it is real. It's not that we're promising this. We actually do reward you with the prize if your topic is selected for a webinar. So here I'm going to hand over to Milan, and he's going to introduce the speakers and taking it from here. Milan, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Marcus. And to everyone, yes, the prize is real. I did receive it yesterday, so feel free to give in your ideas, and yeah, let's keep this going. So we have two speakers for today. Unfortunately, Jane Lawrence couldn't join us, but we have Gama Sibanda from Biomimicry South Africa, who will be then followed by Jess from Learn Biomimicry. So introduction to our first speaker. Gama is a certified biomimicry professional who fuses his training in civil engineering, business, and AI towards the creation of a regenerative planet through his work with the Biomimicry South Africa and other organizations. He co-developed the Biominga innovation model based on evolutionary strategies that nature has continuously tested and redefined over the past 3.8 billion years. Today, Gama will be giving us a brief introduction into what biomimicry is and will provide us with a variety of examples where biomimicry has been utilized across the world within the built environment, going in depth with design and engineering applications. And with that, I'll hand over to Gama.
Thank you. That's not the picture that you saw. I'm learning to wear a beard, so I had issues, and my dermatologist said I should keep one for at least a month. So don't feel cheated that the picture you saw is not what you're now getting. My understanding is that we have a mixture of people in the audience, but the bulk of the audience is people from the built environment. So pardon me if most of my examples are coming from the built environment, and that's not the space that we are exactly in. I'm going to make a presentation. I was wondering whether to give you more content and move fast, or give you less content and move slowly. So I wasn't sure what to do, but maybe let me try and move a bit faster. And since we'll have Q&A, if you've got questions, please do take down the questions, and then I'll try and do my best to address them at the end. All right, let's take it away. So for those who are not familiar with biomimicry, so the concept of biomimicry is 3 levels that we often refer to. And these 3 levels are what we call form, process, and ecosystem. And then you may even ask yourself, what are you talking about, form, process, ecosystem? The idea is that we are emulating nature's creative genius in order to solve human challenges. So I'll take you through some of these examples so that you get some bit of context. Let's start with form and see how that works. So form, you could, for instance, in architecture, take inspiration from other artifacts and objects. That building there, we'll talk about it later. But for now, let's look at the form. You see the Zulu hat there inspiring that entrance. You see the traditional stool inspiring the facade as well, and other things. But even without even going into the structural function of the shape, we are seeing that you can use form both for artistic reasons, but also for structural performance. Another example we can see form is traditionally, you may recall that aeroplanes used to have flat wings until some scientists discovered that the birds of flight, they've got their feathers curled at the end or bent at the end. And that idea was then adopted in our aircraft, and it made the aircrafts fly longer distance because we had reduced aerodynamic drag, and therefore with the fuel tank you could go further because there was less resistance from the air. And nowadays, next time you are in any plane, you will see that the tips of the wings have a turn-up of sorts. We do have other examples like a barrel cactus. This one is interesting because it mixes both form and function. Inside the grooves there, my mom used to have a skate like that. and it looks more like the Scottish kilt of sort. But deep in there, you have your stomata, which, because it's hidden from direct solar radiation, it is therefore not losing much water through evapotranspiration. And this idea, you have seen it in some places now being adapted in buildings, so that you have some of your windows deep inside there, and also to reduce the solar radiation and the loss of the vapor, effectively controlling and regulating the temperature. In terms of process, we know that those in the construction sector, the manufacture of cement contributes as much as 8% of CO2 emissions globally. What if you use some bio-inspired ideas and look at how nature actually creates hard materials? Instead of producing the CO2, actually take the CO2 itself and use it as a resource to actually manufacture the cement. This is what another company has done in the US. We can talk about that later, maybe in the Q&A, but you can do your own Google. There's Dr. Google these days, where you can see that someone has used this, which is interesting because in nature, the concept of waste does not exist. It's a human construct. In nature, you're either someone is food or someone is a resource. So all these things that we consider to be nuisances, what if we actually turn them on their head and use them as our feedstock? Then at the highest level of biomimicry, you have what we call the system, where you have these interdependencies. What I've been talking about, this is a Kalundborg industrial park in Denmark, where they were trying to have this so that each factory's input is someone else's waste material, so that you kind of like have a closed circular loop of sorts in terms of resources. So to sum it up then, if you can mimic form, that's nice. If you can mimic function, that's great. If you can combine and mimic form and function, that's really awesome. And if you can mimic a system, that is pure genius. That is stuff of angels. So I hope that gives you an idea. But if it's still not clear, don't despair. We're now going deeper into some challenges and applications of biomimicry in the built environment. And some of the challenges I'll be talking about, or solutions that we will be talking about in terms of food, water, shelter, energy, waste disposal, transport, communication, security, materials, and resilience. Let's see how far I can cover this. So how can nature inspire our built environment needs? First of all, when you are going to be building anything, you need to have materials, and you ask yourself, how does nature gather these materials? How does nature store these materials? How does nature break down these materials? How does nature recycle, upcycle materials and respond to seasonal changes? Because the breakdown and upcycling becomes important in the built environment, because most of our built environment, we don't think about what we will do with the building at the end of its useful life. That's why most buildings, we end up putting dynamite and imploding them and and cutting the rubble away and things like that. In nature, if we really were inspired by nature, before you even put up any building, the first thing you would ask yourself is, what will happen the day I don't need this building? And this becomes important because in the built-up environment, we can easily lock in non-sustainable products and designs for the next 50 or 100 years, depending on what we are designing. So we really have to be careful how we do this. Here's an example from nature, which is a spider web. And if you do your research, you'll see this spider web is just a spider spinning this using materials from dead flies. And kg for kg, you will be told that it can be stronger than the strongest material that humans have ever put together. There's even some speculation that if you have it thick enough in a particular, size that you can wrap around your hand, you can stop a jumbo jet mid-air at full speed. And that's how strong this thing is, much stronger than Kevlar, which is used as bulletproof material. So, and then you ask yourself, well, in nature, how do we get strength? And in nature, you don't necessarily get strength by using more materials. In our buildings, for instance, we want to add more strength. We make the column thicker and bigger with more reinforcement, but nature uses shape and form. On the left to right there, you can see some changes as one moves from that rectangular bar to a circular one to a hollow tube, and then the shape keeps changing from using 100% down to 2% materials. And these are some of the ideas, and some of the high strength, low weight materials inspired some of these organisms you find under the ocean. And also you talk about our bonds, birds of flight learned to shed off some material. Otherwise, the dead weight would make it virtually impossible for them to take up to the skies. And they only put material where it's needed. Like in the human anatomy, you will find that you will largely have more material around your hips, your knees, those places which are taking up stresses, and the rest is hollow. And this concept has been taken into some of the building structures, including in aviation, where the aircraft fuselage may actually be made of material that is this kind of format, like the bone you see on the left there. And the partitioning in some of the planes these days, it follows that kind of format. And in terms of strength, we see nature uses materials manufactured at ambient temperature in the ocean and still get the strength. And the way it's layered to make sure that if you have a fracture, it doesn't propagate all the way through, unlike our walls and bricks. But once you have a fracture that permeates throughout the entire structure and reflects at the other end. So these are some of the inspirations to consider, or even color. If you think about how nature makes color without using pigments and dyes, that's an example of a moth butterfly there. And that has been mimicked, because what is light anyway? Light is just white light hitting on a surface and being refracted and splitting the different frequencies into the colors of the rainbow. And then you think you are seeing blue, but there's no blue there. So some of these organisms in nature, they use their scales, which they adjust, they flex in particular ways, and then give you a particular color. And I've seen people making color without any of these things. Imagine being able to paint your house. You're living maybe by the ocean, like I'm in Durban right now, and you have to paint your house only once, or your car only once, because you're not using paint, you're using structural color. And also with hygiene, scientists have found that some of the materials, like the skin of a shark, because a shark will swim, you will not find things like barnacles clinging to the skin of a shark. And because of this structure, which has been mimicked at microscopic scale to produce a material that you can then put like wallpaper in hospitals, and you don't have to use chemicals, because the structure itself makes it virtually impossible for bacteria to propagate and grow. So these are some of the ideas, and if you check some of the aerospace engineering magazines and things, you'll see some people beginning to coat the aeroplanes with this kind of microstructure, so that it reduces the amount of cleaning that is required eventually. But it also will then keep your surfaces hygienic. And there are some such materials as well, like the lotus flower, which, if a drop of water drops and lands on the flower, it will form into a ball like mercury and roll off, literally carrying the dirt with it. And this has been adopted in some paints, some surfaces, self-cleaning surfaces. This became an issue during COVID, obviously, with surfaces that needed to be maintained in a hygienic fashion. So these are some of the ideas. Let's move on to water quickly. And how can we manage water flow, minimize erosion, slow down water, collect water, store the water, absorb the water, filter and clean the water? There are many solutions. This picture, I took it, I think, in Costa Rica, I think, or Mexico. I can't remember where I took it. But this is an example of human surfaces. This is what we've done in urban areas, making it virtually impossible for water to percolate. And then we're having challenges with our water table not being replenished, because these are the surfaces we are putting. I'm happy that in my city of in Tshwane, I think by 2063 or 2055, they will ban concrete that is not porous, so that we begin to replenish our ground. I've been involved in a project, I'm not going to talk about it a lot today, where there was a disagreement between a developer and a certain municipality, and we were brought in to come and propose a solution, because the municipality was worried there that this development was going to lead to flooding and all sorts of stresses on the infrastructure, like your stormwater, your sewage and things like that. And we used a benchmark of nature to say, how would nature do it? In nature, depending on how much grass, trees you have certain amounts of water going down into being infiltration, some being runoff, and some being evapotranspiration. So these are the standards you can use to say to a developer, you know what, do what you want to do as long as you conform to these ecological performance standards. And talking about taking inspiration, you don't only take inspiration from other organisms, humans as well. That's an example of someone who's sitting in a train, they pricked themselves, they realized that the blood clot happens fairly quickly. You know, in South Africa, we're told about 38% of the water that we try to distribute never arrives where it's going because of leakages along the way in some of our old infrastructure. And how can you detect some of these leakages in our water pipes and be able to remotely plug them, you know, like the concept we see with some of our modern cars, with some of these fancy tires that even if you get a nail go through the tire, you can straight drive another 50 kilometers because they put a liquid in there that will go and seal that opening. So the same concept, inspired by the human blood and the red blood cells going to clot there and close that, and therefore developing that for pipes so that you are able to detect leakages in the pipes, and you have this method to then plug without ever going on site to do that. How does nature clean water and do flood attenuation? I took this picture outside Pretoria. There is Red Fly Dam there. There is a water. There's a wetland that has been restored, and that wetland cleans the water that is coming polluted all the way from Kempton Park. And it means that there is less chemicals than used to clean that water because it's pre-cleaned naturally by wetlands. And these are some of the things to think about. I know a building in Pretoria on N1 and Linwood there, I think it's called Adams and Adams, which I visited. It used to be the commercial offices of Oregon, I think, and others there. Other companies used to be there, and they've got a vertical wetland which uses gravity. So they pour this grey water on top, somewhere near the top of the building. As it filters coming down by gravity, it's like it's going through a wetland. By the time it gets to the bottom, is somewhat cleaned, We do have other ways of generating water and harvesting water from nature. This is an example from Namibia, a beetle that will bend down on top of the sand dunes. And the surface, it has bumps which attract water vapor molecules. And when they land on the back, they get repelled by an oily sort of hydrophobic surface. And then they form like into bubbles that then roll down to the mouth of the beetle. And there are many people sinking millions of dollars into research into these kind of materials that can literally convert water from air. And there are other solutions, some towers and some other mats that you can put out there, and they collect this water. And hopefully I look forward to go to the beach one day with an empty glass. Just put it next to me there whilst I'm chilling, and a few hours later I have a glass full of water, and then I can drink. It shouldn't be fiction anymore. This one is another example of harnessing nature, where this Lily inspired Park Scientific to come up with a pump that I'm told uses the same energy as a 60-watt bulb, but it will then leverage the natural vortices and magnify the effect and produce a small pump, which is compared to that one you are seeing in the middle there. That's a real one which is used in some of our sewage treatment plants to steer the sewage, and that is an equivalent small little pump sitting in there by looking at how nature turns and leverages vortices. So how can we learn from those who thrive in nature? We are seeing a lot of flood damage, like where I am in Durban. I was visiting some flood damaged areas today, and I was saying to myself, you know what, in nature this wouldn't be a problem. In nature, actually, there are organisms that have figured out how to either live in the water, float on the water, or stay dry, and all sorts of things. Like you have the mangrove there on the right-hand side, which is sorting out and cleaning out and eliminating the salt before it can be used by some of the organisms. And you ask yourself, how can we adapt our designs in the built environment so that flooding is something we welcome, actually, rather than something that is a problem or a challenge for us? Let's do some examples on transport. How does nature transport things? Avoid the need to transport things in the first place and optimize traffic flow. Essentially, this is a slime mold. It's one of the coolest examples. This is mimicking the railway line in Tokyo, Japan, comparing what the engineers produced and what the slime mold produced. Mind-blowing stuff. And we, in the built environment, I spoke earlier, that's me there in a trench when I used to work in, I think this was Ethiopia. Yeah, I was working in Ethiopia at the time. And that was a gully there. And if you look on the right-hand side, you will see some of the solutions around porous concrete that allows water to infiltrate and recharge the underground water. So these are just some ideas in the built environment. This picture of this dead animal, I don't know what the animal is called. I took it in Mexico. I was driving in Mexico, just outside Cancun, and we found this animal on the road. But this is a solution that would have avoided all that. I used to build highways in my previous life before going a lot into biomimicry and other things. And these are simple solutions, like putting bridges for your animals, your elephants to go on top, or putting bridges under the road for your tortoise and other animals to go underneath. We rarely think about these solutions, but if we're in the built environment, if you're a landscape architect, or these are some of the things you may want to think about. If you design roads, highways, these are some of the solutions. Shelter, how does nature regulate temperature, manage wind, optimize light, manage humidity, stay dry, stay afloat, break down disused shelter, recycle shelter? Yeah, so that was me there with that termite mound there. I was, this one I think was taken in Somalia during my days working with the warlords and pirates. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I was helping set up a government, actually. So this is an example of a building I showed you earlier. That's the poster child for biomimicry. For those people in the built environment space, architecture, etc., that building was inspired by termites, the way termites regulate their environment without ESCOM. And we have a situation where you probably have seen termites carrying leaves going underground, and you ask yourself, do they eat leaves? No, they don't. They are farmers. They grow mushroom, and mushroom is sensitive to temperature variation. So they figured out a ventilation system that without ESCOM, they can maintain the temperature in there roughly around 30 degrees Celsius, whether outside is windy, raining, snowing, or whatever. And a friend of mine who is an architect called Mick Pierce, way back in '96, he designed that building inspired, therefore, by the termites, the way they do their ventilation system. And that building has 7 floors. The first 2 are it's like shopping mall. The last 5 floors are offices, and there is no sink air conditioner in there. Well, actually, I found one air conditioner. Somebody I knew who was a CEO of an insurance company. I visited him one day when I was doing my research on the building, and I found him with an air conditioner on the wall. I said to him, but this building doesn't or shouldn't have any air conditioning because it uses the natural processes. And he said, oh, keep quiet, don't talk too loud. But anyway, that air conditioner is not connected to anything. It's just there for decoration. I'm like, why would you decorate your office with a non-working air conditioner? He says, well, it's not for me, it's for my customers. Have you ever seen a CEO with no air conditioner in his office? Yeah, so you see that building actually performs about 83% in terms of energy consumption than buildings of a similar size. So if you can reduce your energy consumption by 83%, that's quite significant. If you really think about in the US, for instance, buildings consuming as much as 40% of the entire energy bill in the country, much more than cars and planes and all that. So it becomes significant. How does nature filter UV light? So we have a situation, for instance, overseas high-rise buildings kill, in Europe, they kill over 300,000 birds annually because the birds come and crash on the glass facades of high-rise buildings. And if you ask yourself, a spider, for instance, it's a web. Why doesn't a spider web get damaged by birds flying in the forest? The spider figured out that if it puts out the webs that are laced with UV light, the birds will see from a distance and avoid going through the nets. And so this concept has now been used to impregnate glass for high-rise buildings so that you can't see it with the naked eye, but the birds which can see UV light are able to see the glass and then avoid hitting it and saving the lives of hundreds of thousands of birds in the process. So I hope to see a lot of South African architects adopting this kind of glass. Energy, how do you generate energy? That is the fin of a humpback whale. The front of it there, it has those bumps. They may look ugly, they serve a purpose. They actually help the humpback whale turn fast in water and all that. And that concept has now been taken up and put, like, for instance, on blades of turbines to actually improve the productivity in terms of energy generation as they turn. And we also have tidal waves, energy harvesting from tidal waves, looking at the fins of fish, and then adapting that to have underground tidal solutions for generating electricity. And this is another one inspired by a school of fish. You probably have seen geese flying in V formation and asked yourself, why are they doing that? Well, they are saving energy. The one in front is expending most of the energy, and the ones that are following behind in that V formation, they have less resistance against the air. And when the one in front gets tired, the others move. Another one moves to the front, and they keep taking turns until they arrive at their destination. And some scientists at Caltech, California Institute of Technology, have discovered that actually some of these vertical turbines, if you put them in close proximity, they will actually reduce the total area needed for turbines whilst increasing energy output. So instead of having a whole wind farm occupying large areas, you can locate these vertical turbines in a much smaller area and increase your output tenfold, up to tenfold, kind of. Communication, maybe let me skip this one. Resilience, how does nature maintain function during disturbance, recover function after disturbance, create cooperative relationships, optimize the resource use, create regenerative value. Well, this is a picture which was taken, I think, somewhere in Gauteng. In nature, you see those leaves. They have all these major veins equivalent to your highways, your secondary veins equivalent to your M1s, your secondary roads, and then those finer ones, which are your street level kind of things, and that's your tertiary roads. If you actually design your highways using this format, you would actually have no traffic jams. But that's a topic for another day. I'll talk about this in a different platform when I talk about designing super efficient highways and optimizing by getting ideas from nature. But for now, you get the idea. And then you have biophilia. These are my kids having fun in the garden some years ago. But we now know from studies that if you are recovering from an operation, if you are given a bed with a window looking into concrete, and someone is given a bed looking into nature, trees, grass, they are going to recover much faster than someone whose window is looking at concrete or something that is not nature. It's another interesting topic of biophilia related to biomimicry as well. So finally, I'm going to run through this. I'm not going to give you details, maybe another day. What if our designs could adapt to environmental changes? There's a whole reason why you'd want to change over time. What if our buildings could adapt to changing conditions? I took this picture in the rainforest in South America. I think it was Costa Rica. But this is a moving tree, a walking tree. It's called the walking tree. It can move a bit depending on how it wants to access light. It will spread the roots and kind of like walk, not like a human being, but walk slowly. What if our own buildings and can also move, harvest water, grow waste from inhabitants? This is a concept building. The idea here was to use waste from the occupants and then use that and build the building, keep going higher with it. Clean water without using chemicals. This we have seen already with our wetlands doing this. Process waste without chemicals. There's John Todd who has come up with eco machines. You can Google this. It's a fascinating concept where a small school or even a hospital, you can convert the waste by using different kingdoms, fungi, fish, and whatever. By the time that waste comes out, it's clean. Like even your polluted water you can take it through these containers and through living kingdoms of different organisms, and the polluted water gets cleaned. And because some of the organisms, what is poisonous to some of us is not poisonous to them, as we saw with the nuclear disaster, which happened, I think it was in Ukraine some years ago. And they discovered that some fungi actually was not affected. It was growing well, actually, under those conditions. But this is a good way of managing our solid waste, or rather our wastewater, and literally use this to remove the smell and grow some of the parks and gardens and produce something nice. How can we adapt to flooding? How can we use our buildings to provide dynamic information? I took this picture at the pyramids somewhere, I think it was Mexico here. But these pyramids used to tell time, like they have opening somewhere where the light goes through when it's the king's birthday and things like that. So most of our buildings, how can we make them do dynamic information? How can we make our built environment climate proof? That picture was taken in South Africa a few years ago when we had floods. And on the left, you see our ants. They figured out a way to stay close to the water so they have access to the water, but far enough to avoid being flooded. These are some ideas. How can we make, for instance, our buildings grow? How can we make them self-repair? How can we make them regenerate? For those who don't know, that is called a sea star, or a starfish. It's not a fish, actually. If you break one limb, it will regrow and come back. And how can we come up with self-healing materials? There is already concrete, cement that is self-healing out there. And so these are some of the ideas that hopefully will inspire you. And finally, how do we self-renew our innovative products? This picture, one of my favorite pictures. Someone dared me $1 million to do this. Needless to say, they lost. Anyway, we can talk about this another time. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that we do not lose sight of the big picture. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? Sometimes we get so focused on a small thing and we don't see the bigger picture, and that's where we get some of these things going wrong. Biomimicry helps you with thinking at systems level, understanding that if I tweak this, this will be the impact on that, and then you are finally able to do that. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop here and defer back to the moderators, and we will see you at Q&A.
Cool. Thank you so much, Gama. I think if you can see through all these examples, there's quite a lot that we can learn from nature, and quite a lot that we can adapt, especially in the built environment, looking at energy, water, waste, and the materials that we use. And it speaks very well to the living building challenge as well. But that's a topic for another day. Anyway, let me introduce our next speaker, Jess. Jess is a biomimicry educator and the co-founder of Learn Biomimicry. For over a decade, Jess has worked closely with Biomimicry South Africa and assisted in building up the biomimicry community in our country through lecturing, running local workshops, and hosting immersions. She will show us today how we can learn more about designing a living and thriving world, from the basics of biomimicry to transformative learning journeys and more, and how we can get connected to both the local and global biomimicry networks. Over to you, Jess.
Thank you so much, Milan. Alrighty, just for one moment, I'm going to just quickly turn on my camera and give everybody a little wave. Hello, just so you know exactly who's talking to you. And I know that we're running a little close to the edge here, so I'm going to make this a high-speed presentation. So get those little writing hands out, and here we go. So thanks very much for the introduction, Milan. As he said, my name is Jess, and I worked closely with the late Claire Janisch, the founder of Biomimicry South Africa. And basically, over the years, we've put together a whole lot of biomimicry learning materials because often the question is, oh my goodness, this is amazing. How do I jump in? This is how you jump in. And I'm here today just to tell you very quickly about learning to design a living, thriving world and how we personally go about this. So before we jump in, I wanted to quickly give you just 3 kind of key pointers that I'm going to be covering in this, and that I want to speak about vision-based learning. So most of the time we kind of consider learning as like kind of this tick box exercise and points and all the rest. That's personally not our perspective. We want you to learn because you love this idea. You're so excited about what the world can be like. I want to quickly cover what does it mean to actually live and thrive, and chatting about regenerativeness and resilience and agility. And then just quickly at the end, just talking about how you might want to take those first or next steps. So what does a living, thriving world look like? What if you took all of those examples that Gama just showed you and put them together in a living environment? Like, what always astounds me is all of our kind of sci-fi movies are this horrible, dreary, dystopian, like gray blur that just kind of starts with the sound of the foghorn. But like, what happens if we actually use our collective human intelligence and build something that can thrive, that we actually enjoy living in when things aren't broken and polluted and disgusting? So really, I mean, there's just some beautiful concept images and as well as real photographs of places by various architects that just show how life could be full of places that actually are creating conditions conducive to life. And I love this image like on the bottom left by concept artist Carl Schulschenk, because it just to me kind of looks like a downtown Joburg scene, but like Joburg on having a really good day, right? It's beautiful and it's so full of life. And really, what could we actually come up with if we work together and really applied our own creativity? So what does it mean to have a thriving living world? It means that our cities can function like forests. They can function like ecosystems, right? So we're building soil, we're cycling water, we're cleaning air, we're incorporating diversity. All of these things working together to build healthy, regenerative habitats. So we're using completely distributed systems that are resilient through having multiple routes and multiple access points, as opposed to our single points of failure, ESCOM. That we're all so familiar with here. What would it look like if we could all actually tap into that? What would it look like if we could use systems that are able to cycle waste, to upcycle that, to turn it into new and exciting products that are actually keeping nutrients literally and figuratively flowing through the ecosystem? How could we design in modular systems that allow us to very cleverly develop things that move with the shifting landscape? I mean, how often have you seen developments that are just like copy and paste, or the exact same house just for kilometers? But what happens if we could actually adapt those to the slightly different ecosystems that it's in, or the different functions that it needs to perform? So there's just so much wisdom when we start looking to nature and like, whoa, we can just make our whole place so much better, right? It's just, there are so many options for really designing a far more well-adapted world. And now I get people going, but I'm not a civil engineer, I'm not an architect, I'm not a developer. There's obviously no place in this for me. And to which I say, nonsense. What does it take to actually, what are the different scales of regenerative design? So I hope you can see on my screen, and on the far left, you kind of got green chemistry, which is just looking at from the chemistry level, how do we build things up? And then we've got product designs, and then we've got architecture, and then we've got community, and then we've got industrial ecology, and then urban planning, and then bioregional planning, and national international collaboration. And this is just to say, like, I'm sure that almost everybody in this call can identify with at least one of these zones of opportunity for developing better, more health-creating cities, right? So if we have this vision to actually work and develop something that is more life-supporting, there's definitely ways to do this. Now, again, I hate this when it's biomimicry. We say like, we want to design something, and you Google what does design look like, and it turns out it's all Pantone and web design, which is nonsense, right? Biomimicry and design means to create. That's all it is. It's a creating. So whether you're creating cities, whether you're creating businesses or products or technologies or food systems or, just incredible economic systems, you are part of this. You are designing, you are creating. So when somebody says, oh, I want to design something, and you go, oh, I'm not a designer, this doesn't apply. Yes, it does. You also have a part in this, right? And the beautiful thing about biomimicry is that it is this interdisciplinary practice, and it's, most things actually are, but we just don't acknowledge that because of our learning systems, which said, right, all of us are segmented by age, height, ability, subject, blah, 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 blah. Totally. I mean, who lives in a house with only one kind of product? Like, that's nonsense. Everything has to kind of work together. And so biomimicry just really brings the sense of connectedness to the fore, because you can't be a biology expert and a product design expert and a marketer and a producer, everything, all together. You have to work with different areas of expertise to actually realize these visions. So while we can all specialize, we all work together as well. And so that's what you'll really see in the biomimicry community, is this completely and utterly diverse interdisciplinary community and community of practice. I hope this is making sense. I know this is high speed, but I know it's 5 o'clock. People got to go places. The last thing on the design side is that biomimicry teaches you how to design for context. So again, you might be designing something as simple, well, it's very complicated actually, but the chemistry that goes into a particular product, or you might be going all the way out to huge international relations, economic systems and everything. But all of this is fitting within the pale blue dot. It's fitting within planet Earth. And biomimicry, through our various methodologies and principles, allows you to design well for the context of living on planet Earth. We often forget that. We all live together on this planet and what it means to actually live and thrive on this planet. But that's really, it constantly brings it home to going, are we being a well-adapted species? Are we making our cities conditions conducive to life? Are we actually being regenerative? And that's really a wonderful sort of mental compass to have when it comes to actually designing. Okay, so that's sort of what we're designing, and that's the goal. How do we learn biomimicry? Well, it kind of says it in the company name, right? You can go to learn biomimicry. And what we did was we said, we have lots and lots of information, like you've just had from Gama's talk and from, I'm sure, what you've heard before. And between my 10 years working with Claire, her 10 years of being a biomimicry professional, we scoured information through books and talks and websites and just about everything, and have been able to aggregate all of this and distill it into something that you can learn from very quickly, very easily. So what we have is a series of online courses and online learning opportunities. And this is really what we're all about, is making biomimicry accessible. There are lots of different options, some from free websites, short videos, boom, there they are, 6 to 12 minutes each, allowing you to kind of fit this into your busy lives. And accompanying those are digital handbooks, which are downloadable, and that allows you to really digest this information in a longer, slower format and full of activities and all the rest. That kind of allows you to sort of take it with you wherever you are in a slower format. Then we also have 2 6-month mentor programs, which I'll show you now how it all kind of fits into the learning journey. But that is our practitioner program and educator program. So the foundational courses are for absolutely anybody wanting a really great foundation and a starting point. Then the 6-month mentor programs are how you really take this further and learn how to apply biomimicry to your own context. So educator program is for educators. The practitioner program is for pretty much anybody else. This could be product designers, business owners, it could be organizational structures. I mean, really anybody, architects, civil engineers, developers. And this allows you on a project learning basis to be able to apply biomimicry step by step to your own context. And then you're connected with a whole cohort of learners, to a whole biomimicry learning community. And it just allows you to kind of take the next step and really become a biomimicry practitioner, biomimicry educator. And the educator version is that we're enabling you to understand all the different moving parts of biomimicry and how to integrate it into your teachings. So this is where you start to really change the world. This is super exciting. So you have the 3 foundational online short courses, and then from there you have the option of also taking it forward into practitioner or into an educator program. So the 3 foundationals are the Introduction to Biomimicry, Biomimicry Principles, and Biomimicry Masterclass. And if you started taking these, you would start to kind of recognize these from Gama's talk as well, in terms of asking those questions of like, how could our designs, and what if we, and thinking on those different levels of being able to apply biomimicry form, process, system, integrating some of those principles, and then really being able to view our world from what would it look like if we apply biomimicry on a systems level, and that's your masterclass, and then again, being able to apply it. So at the end of those, you'll get certificates of completion for each of them, for the foundational courses, as well as for our practitioners and educators. And all of the certificates are endorsed by the Biomimicry Institute. They are supporters of our biomimicry education programs. And where to from here? If you want to take this out into the field, well, then speak to Biomimicry South Africa. And they'll be also hosting a number of workshops coming up this year and next. So they're definitely a great place to get hold of. Sign up on the website. I'll get those links down at the bottom for you now. And just going outside is such a fundamentally amazing part of learning biomimicry and learning how to design this kind of living, thriving world. When you're actually immersed in it and learning from it, that's where the magic starts to happen, and you start to really, really see all of the inspiration that's out there. I like to think of it as the living library. So all we need to do is learn how to actually access it, and all of the answers for our biggest challenges actually lie outside. So if you're wanting to learn with us, maybe take a screenshot or a photo. There's a little 15% off for the foundational course set. If you're wanting to get hold of us, it's learnbiomimicry.com. And for BiomimicrySA, their new website, please take note of this, is biomimicrysa.life. So that's where you can get hold of Jane and Milan and the crew, and take your immersions further as well with them. So that is it from me. That was a super duper high speed, but I know it's end of the day for everyone, and don't want to keep you here too long, and we can't handle an inspiration overload, let's be honest. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jess. And yeah, for everyone online, I'd highly encourage you to take the courses, as I've done it myself, and it truly changes your perspective on how you view the world, simply by just stepping outdoors and looking at things differently. And yeah, on that note, I'd like to invite you guys to give any questions to our speakers, and yeah, let's have a conversation.
Okay, if nobody has a question, I'll have a question for Gama. So when you start off with biomimicry, or you start off with a design of a building, like what sort of other questions that we need, like how do we integrate it in our design process from a design point of view? Like, do you have any topics you can give us? Like, what are the first 3 questions that we should ask ourselves if we start designing a building?
Yeah, so these principles, I think they would apply not only to buildings, but to anything really that involves applying biomimicry. Remember, there are 2 ways you can apply biomimicry. Let me start with the easy one, which is what happened in 1941 to George de Mestral. He was walking outside, minding his own business. The bears, this blackjack thing, stick to his trousers, stick to his dog. He gets back at home. He says, let's see what's this thing. Why is it holding on to my trousers? And my dog puts under a microscope. He sees how it's done. He decides to make Velcro. The rest is history. That's the easy part, where you are minding your own business. You get this kind of inspiration. And we call that moving from biology to design. Now, then there is the other one, which is more deliberate. Like if you say to me, I've got a problem. I want to design a building that creates its own energy so that it has net zero energy. And the way I would approach that is different, because then the first thing I would do is to biologize that question. In biomimicry, we work with functional biology. So I will not say, how does nature create a fancy building? No, nature doesn't create any fancy buildings. I would instead look and ask myself and say, how does nature create or regulate energy? And then I would then look for biological well, I'll put context, in fact, before I even go further, because it's not just regulating temperature. You may say regulating temperature maybe in a cold place like the Arctic Circle or Antarctic. So it puts a bit of context there. It's like saying, how do you run fast? You don't just run fast. How do you run fast on sand? How do you run fast on water if you can be like the Jesus lizard and run on top of the water? So the context is important. Then once you have you biologized your question, and then you convert it to functional terms, and then you sort out your context, then you look at biological examples by asking yourself, who out there in nature has solved this problem? And how did they actually solve it? And then once you have got that sorted out, then you look at different solutions. You may have one, you can have 100 organisms. The more organisms using the same strategy, the more confidence you have that it actually works. And then you emulate that strategy then. In fact, before you even emulate, you take it out of biology and use it in non-biological terms, because you can't keep using organisms that people don't understand. For instance, if you want to live forever, you're going to look for organisms that we know keep regenerating themselves without dying. And then what you will do is to say, how are they doing it? And then you take out that strategy and say, maybe this organism consumes this ingredient, and then that becomes now your design principle, to say, I'm going to use this kind of ingredient to do ABC. Then the next thing, you emulate and actually do a prototype, which could be a viable minimum product. And then the last thing you want to do is to evaluate that what you have done meets the ecological performance standard. The last thing you want to do is to create something that brings another problem. Like we saw in the past, we put asbestos roofing sheets in our houses. Little did we know that asbestos could eventually cause us problems in our lungs if those asbestos sheet broke into smaller pieces and we inhaled that. So the ecological performance standard, which is what we call life principles, I'm sure Jess at Learn Biomimicry can give you an entire course on that, but that becomes your benchmark to measure that what we are doing in terms of how you manufacture it, how you use it, and what's going to happen at the end of its useful life. It's not creating an environmental debt for future generations. So that's pretty much, it sounds a bit complicated, but once you get a hang of it, it's like driving a car or riding a bicycle. Thanks.
So and people, please put in your questions on the chat, and otherwise I'm going to keep on asking questions. So with BiomimicrySA, if we have a project and we would like you to do like a presentation, how does BiomimicrySA get involved with projects? Do you assist with, if I have a project and we want to do like a biomimicry workshop to get everybody on the same page, to get people inspired about it, or would you rather like be appointed as a member on the team, or how does BiomimicrySA work?
Okay.
Or not at all?
No.
So fine.
So let me make it clear that one of the things I've been doing with other people like-minded, especially Clay Yanish, who graduated in the first cohort globally I was in the second cohort. She came out, I think, in 2010, and I graduated in 2013. And we've been giving talks in schools, universities, and all sorts of things. The intention there was to make sure everyone in South Africa knows about biomimicry, to create that mindset. But as BiomimicrySA, we have different vehicles we use, but they are pretty much in three spaces. There is the space of education where we teach, like we have learned biomimicry. There is research, where you may want to solve a problem that no one has solved before. Then there could be one of actual practical designing. Maybe you want to design a gizmo, or you want to design a city that functions like a forest, and all sorts of things. So in a nutshell, we do pro bono initiatives, but we also have initiatives for which you would need to cover the cost of the people who are going to deploy their time and expertise to deliver that outcome that you want to deliver. So we will be soon resuming our monthly, or maybe every 2 months, we might have biomimicry talks, which makes it easy now. In the past, we had a chapter in Gauteng, a chapter in Western Cape, a chapter in Midlands in Durban. But with COVID, and thanks to everyone using Zoom and Microsoft, now we can have a whole national engagement. So watch this space in the next couple of months. In fact, next month we hope to kick off our first talk, which again becomes something we're putting out there. It could be something pro bono, just to get people to access, because not everyone can afford to hire someone to do something specific. So we have this combination of a space where you can access information for free, because there are no patents in nature. So we try and make sure most of our content is free, but you pay for that content, which requires someone to dedicate their time and effort attending to you and stopping everything else they are doing. I hope that helps.
That helps. Great. Thank you. There's a question from Sarah. What's the best example of biomimicry in building in South Africa? Or are there a lot of examples available? We always talk about the Eastgate anthills, and so are there any examples?
One of I don't know now, what used to be the greenest building in South Africa is the Department of, it used to be called DEA. Yeah, I think it's called DEF now. Department, I think, of Forest, Fisheries, and something along those lines. Yeah, Department of Environment, Fisheries, and Forest, or something like that. But I may have mixed up the chronology there. But the fascinating story is that the way they designed it, if you look from above, they actually followed the Fibonacci series in a way. From the entrance, they use that spiral kind of thing there. And for those who may not understand the importance of the Fibonacci sequence, you get it everywhere in your human body. Like your height relates in relation to your body parts, to the entire length of the arm, the height from there to there, the nose to that. All these things pretty much follow that ratio, the golden ratio. So probably is one of the buildings I can think of that had that twist to it. And I'm sure the other buildings, I don't know. There are some which mimic nature, like the building I told you about, which kind of like has got a wetland, trying to mimic how nature does the natural cleaning by combining gravity and wetland packing of materials in there. And yeah, we will have more amazing examples in the near future, I think. We hope to put South Africa on the map. And Namibia has got the Namibia beetle as well that inspires the conversion of air into water. So I think we will have one in South Africa pretty soon as well.
There is a new biophilic design-based development going up in Cape Town, I think, in the not too distant future. I think it finally got the go-ahead.
The Fynbos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exciting residential development in Cape Town. Yeah. There's a question, maybe Jess, you can answer this one. What are the limitations of the biomimicry approach, if there are any?
You know, all three of these questions, Tazia, Sarah's, and Darisha's, kind of actually interlink a little bit. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of show how they sort of weave together a bit. So the limitations of the biomimicry process, I think, is that people often assume that, you know, if you understand biomimicry, you know how to do everything, but that's not the case. Is that you still need to work with other specialists in order to be able to, you know, fulfill these visions. So in biomimicry, sometimes you're the specialist who understands how to scope out the challenge and really ask those questions. Sometimes you're the person who really understands the biology and can do the translation process. Sometimes you're the person who understands like the kind of creating, being able to draw on those abstracted design principles, as Gama was speaking about. You know, and so, you know, you're not always going to be able to be the best at all of these parts. And so being able to know how to work with other people, I would say, is something that is quite fundamental. So, you know, sometimes everyone goes, oh, biomimicry, you know, you just put the biomimicry sticker on it and, you know, that's good. But, you know, the limitation is that it's still a practical design process. And so you need to be able to know how to work with people, right? And how to be able to ask the right questions. So, you know, I think that is it. And something else that is slowly coming into the biomimicry methodology, lines of teaching, is also looking at the human aspect, because sometimes we go nature, 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 as in everything non-human, but there's so much genius that actually lies within ourselves, our own bodies, our communities, indigenous wisdom, so much, you know, traditional knowledge that we can draw on. And a lot of the time, anything human related is kind of sidelined. But, you know, there's a huge movement to say, like, hang on, let's draw on that knowledge and that kind of collective genius between, you know, us as people and as a species and as a history to actually really solve these challenges. So, you know, I hope that that kind of answers that. And then, you know, Darisha, you're talking about the life cycle assessments. Again, that becomes something that, you know, when you get to designing this whole product or system, and you're going to integrate life's principles in this to make it as kind of non-waste possible, non-waste-ish as possible, you know, you're going to get as far as you can. But then again, you're going to call in somebody who is a specialist at life cycle assessments, and they're going to be able to identify key components where you could actually improve. And from there, you can go back to the biology or back to life's principles or biomimicry and be able to say, this is how we can actually improve and improve and improve. And, you know, Sarah, yes, permaculture totally does tie in with this. And again, you know, it's a related field, and it's a great, it really strongly relates with like the ethos of biomimicry and the no waste kind of methodologies and ideologies, and being able to work with the genius of that place and really, you know, being more regenerative in place, integrating your community, integrating, you know, being locally attuned and responsive, you know, being able to kind of draw on what's there. So yeah, I think, you know, in summary, sometimes people think that biomimicry by itself will solve everything, but we have to, you know, leverage, connect, and leverage our own wisdom and leverage things that already work, you know, like permaculture and like indigenous knowledge and like the kind of genius of place, in order to actually make something that is beautiful and regenerative.
Great, thank you so much. Like both Gama and Jess, like it was amazing. I really enjoyed the presentations. I wish we had way more time to actually dive into a lot more of the detail of all the examples that you showed. And thank you for the high quality presentation with all the pictures. I think like graphically making it like very, it makes us understand and link it back to what we know as architects, right? So I'm going to quickly wrap up the upcoming events for next month. We have a very exciting webinar on alternative building materials, and in October we'll try to do something on building modeling and simulations and how it relates to regenerative design. And then in November, just before the holidays, we'll try to sort of see what we can do with regenerative holidays and how you can all make your holiday a lot more regenerative. So next week, just like a brief overview. I'm sure most of you have heard about the hemp building going up in Cape Town. So we're going to be featuring that. We're going to have a speaker talking about that. And also we're going to try to get a speaker around the Helderberg Environmental Center, which has applied a lot of different building techniques with eco bricks, with rammed earth, with tires, and it looks stunning. So I think we have 2 really exciting projects that we're going to be featuring in our next webinar next month. Again, just a reminder, if you have a topic that you would like to see featured on one of these webinars, let us know and we will have a look at that. And then again, a call for sponsorship. If you want to become a sponsor, or if you have a company that you feel like should be sponsoring our webinars, really, like, I'm not like when I say it's not a lot, I really say it's not a lot. It's really to cover the validation of the CPD point. So please let us know and help us find some sponsors. And then a huge thank you to our speakers of today, Gama from Biomimicry South Africa and Jess from Learn Biomimicry. Thank you so much for your time and your efforts to be here. We really enjoyed the presentations. Thank you a lot. And then just a reminder, our previous events, check them out on our Greennote website. You can have a look at all the previous webinars as well. And that's it for me. And that was right on point, right on time. Hope you guys are ready to start the evening and work on a more regenerative world. Thank you so much and see you next month.
Thank you for the opportunity and thank you everyone for attending. Ciao.
Ciao. Thank you. Bye.